Hello, everybody. My name is Marsh, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different than usual. Usually, I have like some type of book review, or I'm talking about some type of show, or analyzing something in a certain way. Instead, today, I just wanted to sort of talk about my thoughts when it came to philosophy. So, I started reading philosophy this year, and my plan is to get through the complete works of Plato um, throughout the year and basically finish this. I'll just read a little bit a day, about 5 or 6 pages, and attack it basically from there. And basically just see what I get out of it and what I enjoy. Now, I'm not an expert at all when it comes to philosophy. I haven't read any books when it comes to philosophy either, as well. So, this is my first exposure. And so, I'm basically with these videos just gonna be journaling my trip through what I read when it comes to philosophy, in this case, Plato this year, and what I think about it, what I get from it, and overall my thoughts. I thought it'd be an interesting experiment in terms of seeing what someone who doesn't really have a background in philosophy thinks of things. So don't come here looking for like a total explanation when it comes to certain passages and books. It's more of my reaction and experience, what I get from it, and basically a viewpoint of fresh eyes, because I don't know if other people that are into philosophy would be interested in this, but usually you're taught a certain way to interpret things a certain way, and obviously you can question it and look at things from one end to another, but I find it interesting getting a perspective from someone who has no experience at all and seeing what they take from it, because maybe they'll point out something new and fresh that you don't know. Not saying I'll do that, but maybe if you guys are experts in philosophy, you may find interest in that, if that makes sense. So for this first journaling, basically, I read 2 works by Plato. The first one was Euthyphro, and the second one was Apology. Now, I apologize if I mispronounce anything. I'm not an expert when it comes to the names, so I'm probably going to butcher a lot of them, but I apologize. Both of these were translated by G.M.A. Grube, and so I'm just going to basically go look at my notes, tell you what I thought about it overall. From what I understand with the first passage, Euthyphro, it's basically Socrates, which I believe was the mentor of Plato, talking to Euthyphro in the market about him being put on trial because he's basically being impious, and he is being accused of not believing in the gods and corrupting the youth, essentially. That's at least what I gathered from it for the most part. Now, in terms of insights for this particular passage, there was like a few things. So let me just go through my notes and we'll kick it off from there. If you see me looking down a lot, I'm just reading all my like margins and everything that I did in between. I filled a good amount of the pages up with stuff to say. I don't know if it was very insightful per se, but it was just notes and thoughts at the time. Basically, what I gathered for the most part, it was Socrates arguing with Euthyphro about what is considered pious and impious. There was many parts where basically he was forcing Euthyphro to come up with a definition. So, for example, Euthyphro kind of like pointed out, he's like, "Oh, you just know it when you see it," kind of thing. When it comes to that type of argument, and basically he threw it in his face and he's like, "Well, if you know what being pious is when you see it, would you say you're a good judge at being pious? And are you able to say that you are able to determine what is pious? Because I know you put your father on trial because he did an impious deed in terms of killing or mistreating the person who was a murderer. And so even though he was a murderer, I'm not sure if he was a murderer or he was like a robber, or like he committed crimes, basically. He mistreated a criminal. And so he's putting his father on trial because he killed the mistreated criminal, essentially. And his father was looking at it as like a just punishment for that criminal, versus he says you have no right to do that to that person, so this is an impious act. And so because of this trial that Euthyphro is going through, Socrates is basically saying, I can use your case for my case because you are obviously a good judge of what is impious and pious. And so since you're a good judge of that, obviously you can let me know what the definition is so that I can actually display this and give it to the people who are trying me and let them use it to basically prove my innocence. And I think the point that Socrates is really trying to get by is that one person cannot be the sole person that decides what is pious and impious based off what perspective we're looking at. Essentially, he gets Euthyphro into a hole where he gets him to say, yes, I am a judge of what is pious and impious. I know it when I see it. And then he takes him through like multiple different definitions, such as, oh, well, if this isn't a pious act, what is that? And he says, what is pious versus what is not? So, for example, let me find some of my notes. So, for example, Euthyphro says, well then, what is dear to the gods is pious, what is not is impious. And Socrates says, splendid, Euthyphro. You have now answered in the way I wanted. Whether your answer is true, I do not know yet, but you will obviously show me that why you say that is true. And so they go on and talk about stuff. Essentially, they get to the point later where Socrates says this. I'll just read through the passage. I think it's a good one. So, come then, let us examine what we mean. An action or man dear to gods is pious, but an action or man hated by gods is impious. They are not the same, but quite opposite. The pious and the impious, is that not so? It is indeed. And that seems to be a good statement. I think so, Socrates. We have also stated that the gods are in a state of discord and that they are at odds with each other, Euthyphro, and that they are at enmity with each other. Has that too been said? It has. What are the subjects of difference that cause hatred and anger? Let us look at it this way. If you and I were to differ about numbers as to which is greater, which would this difference make us enemies and angry with each other, or would we proceed to count and soon resolve our difference about this? We would certainly do so. Again, if we differed about the larger and smaller, we would turn measurement and soon cease to differ. That is so. And about the heavier and lighter, we would resort to weighing and being reconciled. Of course. What subject of difference would make us angry and hostile to each other if we were unable to come to a decision? Perhaps you do not have the answer ready, but examine, as I tell you, what these subjects are just and unjust, the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the bad. Are these not the subjects of difference about which, when we are unable to come to a satisfactory decision, you and I and other men become hostile to each other whenever we do? That is the difference, Socrates, about those subjects. What about the gods, Euthyphro? If indeed they have differences, will it not be about the same subjects? It certainly must be so. Then, according to your argument, my good Euthyphro, different gods consider different things to be just, beautiful, ugly, good, and bad, for they would not be at odds with one another unless they differed about these subjects, would they? You are right. So basically he gets him in this hole where he gets him to say what the gods love is basically pious. But then Socrates points out that gods are always differing and bickering with each other. So how can one god say one thing? Which god should we listen to? Why is one god superior over the other? What if what I believe in is tailored towards that specific god and what you believe in is not? So just because I don't believe in what your specific god believes is pious, then that makes me impious? That's basically sort of what I'm getting that he's getting at with that. I notice he likes to break down a lot of arguments in parts, and so he'll do a lot of like basic things. He'll compare something and be like prior. He'll say, do we not differ about larger and smaller? Do we not differ about heavier and lighter? Things like that. So he'll take a lot of like small things to make a point and explain it, and then he'll explode that small thing to take control of the broader view of what he's trying to talk about. So he'll get the person to agree on multiple things going forward with the argument, and then finally he'll hit them with the one that they don't agree with. But according to the logic of everything else they agreed with prior, they should agree with it. And so that's sort of the way he goes about attacking, and I say attacking in a friendly way, Euthyphro, and a lot of the people he's arguing with, at least with Socrates. And I found it very interesting the way he compartmentalized that. And he does that for a while. And it's basically the majority of it, him arguing with him over what is pious, what is not pious, and things of that sort. And I think what he's trying to get through overall, or explain to Euthyphro, is that you can't take definitions or things in totality. So when you define something in totality and you say that it has to be this way, it kind of breaks it, because you can break it down and find something that doesn't fit. And so when we define something, we have to sort of define it under an umbrella. it's not as clear as black and white, yes or no. There's always gray in between. And so Socrates is trying to get him to understand that just because you see something as white and someone else sees something as white doesn't mean that you both see something as white. You both technically see it as gray. One might see it as a darker or lighter gray, and vice versa, but you're both seeing it as gray, and it falls under an umbrella. That's basically what I'm gathering from his argument with him for the most part. It basically ends there. He tries to get like a pure definition out of him and asks him if he could like stand trial with him and be like, oh, since you're such a great judge of character, you can come to my trial. And basically Euthyphro gets scared and intimidated by Socrates, and so he just goes off on his way. And he jokes with him. He's basically saying, you cast me down from great hope. I would learn from your nature of the pious and impious, so to escape Meletus's indictment by showing him that I have acquired wisdom in divine matters from Euthyphro, and my ignorance would no longer cause me to be careless, inventive about such things, and that I would be better for the rest of my life. And that basically is Euthyphro. The argument, him deciding what's pious and impious, and I think overall saying that the truth is not always so clear. And when you indict someone for certain things that are opinionated, it isn't necessarily right despite what the major viewpoint will look at, if that makes sense. I kind of explained it better earlier, but that's sort of what I got from it. But after that, it goes on to apology. And this is the last part I'm going to cover in terms of what I get from it. And this will be a little bit longer than Euthyphro, but we'll take it with what I did. I have a lot more notes for apology, so we'll just take it one by one. And sorry if this is getting a long video. I hope you find it interesting, but let's go ahead and jump into it. Basically, with apology, Socrates is going to make his argument as to why he should be innocent when it comes to these indictments that Meletus and a few other people have dropped on him. And so I want to cover this from a few aspects. I want to cover some of the arguments he's making, but I want to also cover where I think he went wrong in his arguments and why they sentence him to death, essentially, because it's not really a spoiler. They sentence him to death. So I want to put what I figured was like the turning point in terms of like what went wrong for him. And a lot of this is due to his own arrogance and also some of the interesting things in his arguments, because obviously I don't think that he is guilty of anything. He was just teaching people. I don't think he's corrupting, but it was a different time back then. So the first thing I wanted to mention about this aspect is basically the idea that Socrates is being attacked. So basically what I gathered from these first few pages is that Socrates was basically saying, due to the religious brainwashing at a young age that a lot of people had at this time, just merely the act of questioning things, which is basically the basis of philosophy, scares the public and scares his accusers. And just because he plays devil's advocate oftentimes to get someone to think in different ways, basically that puts him on the wrong side of religion, and it makes people think that he is basically impious and that he's corrupt and that he believes these things, when oftentimes he's just questioning things to get people to think. And he wants you to think for yourself and think through things. And so it's basically the basis of philosophy is questioning things. At least that's what I take when it comes to the basis of philosophy. And that's the whole point, is to get you to think in different ways. And so he's saying a lot of them are brainwashed. Next, he goes into the idea of what is wisdom, which I found very interesting. So, for example, he said, what kind of wisdom? Human wisdom, perhaps? It may be that I really possess this, while those whom I mention just now are wise with a wisdom more than human. Else I cannot explain it, for I certainly do not possess it. And he's talking about wisdom. I think he goes into a point of what I said in my notes. Being wise does not necessarily make you immune to things. So he speaks about human wisdom, and basically, I presume, makes an argument that godly wisdom and how one claims to be religiously wise isn't necessarily true. And I think one of the very important quotes when it comes to it is this. So he says, I am wiser than this man. It is likely that neither of us knows anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something when he does not, whereas when I do not, neither do I think I know. So I am likely to be wiser than he is to small extent, that I do not think I know what I do not know. And he breaks down basically why everyone hates him, because I believe it's the goddess Delphi he was talking about, told him that he's like the wisest man that there is. Reason being is because he doesn't believe he's the wisest man. And so he tries to seek out whoever claims to be the wisest person in whatever area he's in. He'll go to them, he'll ask them like certain things. And basically what he learned through all this is that the fact that a lot of these people are so arrogant to claim that they're the wisest and they don't need to learn anything else shows how unwise they are, because their closed-mindedness and arrogance, thinking that they know everything, shows that they aren't open to learning new things and questioning things. Therefore, they aren't really that wise, because they're actually closed-minded and arrogant. And therefore, he is wiser technically, not because he's necessarily smarter or more knowledgeable, but because he knows that he does not know everything, and therefore he's ready to learn, if that makes sense. So for example, he says, in my investigation in the service of God, I found that those who had the highest reputation were nearly the most efficient, while those who were thought to be inferior were more knowledgeable. Like I said, basically, if you think yourself inferior and you have more to learn, you're more knowledgeable because you are willing to take more in, versus if you think you know everything, you are arrogant and closed-minded and you don't want to learn anything else. And another point he makes to emphasize this is, he says, I am ashamed to tell you the truth, gentlemen, but I must. Almost all the bystanders might have explained the poems better than their authors could. I soon realized that the poets do not compose their poems with knowledge, but by some inborn talent and by inspiration, like seers and prophets who also say many fine things without understanding what they say. And for my notes on that, I basically put, I guess you could say even the poet doesn't know it. Anyways, and basically it goes off to where he claims that oftentimes a lot of people will gain deeper meaning in reality, and the artists themselves will be just too arrogant to say that they just wrote something. They'll claim that it's built in reality instead of just saying that something just came to them, versus the people who actually read it and gain profound knowledge from it and gather certain things that the artist didn't know at the time. Because oftentimes artists don't know what they're writing per se, or what message they're trying to get across all the time. Sometimes it's intentional, but at least in the sake of the poets, they're saying they act more thoughtful than they really are, if that makes sense. And that's why you see a lot of artists, I feel like in Hollywood and things like that, they'll claim, oh, someone will ask them, what's the meaning of your movie? And they'll be like, I can't really tell you. I'll let you gather that meaning yourself. I know what it means to me. And they're just being arrogant, basically. They don't know what it means. They just wrote it out, and they don't have a way to explain it, so they put on that facade. And on that same point, he's also telling them how he's wise. And so going off of that, I like this other quote that he mentioned. He said, this man, wisdom, is worthless. Or he said, this man among you, mortals, is wisest, who, like Socrates, understands that his wisdom is worthless. And like I said before, he basically is saying that no matter what you know and what you see, you should really be willing to learn more and be open. And that's what he's trying to purvey to all his jurors. So to let them know that, hey, what I'm doing, playing devil's advocate, questioning certain things, it's not because I believe those things necessarily. I'm trying to get you to think in different ways. He then goes on, and I noted here, this is like his first misstep, I think, in terms of like the trial. Now, obviously, Socrates isn't trying to play favors to the trial. He's not trying to become innocent. If that's what he was going for, he would have been able to do that. His point at his age, because I think he said he was 70 plus years old, he's lived a long life, he is trying to prove a point. And obviously, when it comes to that, he doesn't care if he dies. And so he's not going out there trying to beg and win his way. He just wants to prove a point. And so one of the first missteps I put is this quote. It said, they would not want to tell the truth, I'm sure, that they have been proved to lay claim to knowledge when they know nothing. Basically, he starts to attack the people who are accusing him. And I feel like this aggressiveness towards Miletus and the other two people, I can't remember their names, is basically like it's not in good taste. He's attacking them to prove a point, obviously, and prove that he's more knowledgeable, that he's right, that he's innocent. But in the way that he's attacking them, he starts attacking Meletus specifically and starts questioning him. And it's just not in good taste. And I feel like, at least if I was a juror, I know you're supposed to take it all the empirical evidence and do it that way. But we're human and emotions come into play. And so obviously they're not going to feel comfortable that way when he's attacking people. And he's essentially calling a lot of the jurors dumb as well. And so it's not the best way to get people to like you by attacking them. That's just common knowledge. I even wrote underlined on the next page, stop attacking them. But he's trying to prove a point. And basically he goes on to talk about corruption and how he's the claims against him for corrupting the young's minds and what that means. And so he says, either I do not corrupt the young, or if I do, it is unwillingly, and you are lying in either case. Now, if I corrupt them unwillingly, the law does not require you to bring people to court for such unwilling wrongdoings, but to get a hold of them privately, to instruct them and exhort them. For clearly, if I learn better, I shall cease to do what I am doing unwillingly. So, one point in that, I thought at first this was smart, but then if you really think about it, if you unwillingly break a law, you still break a law. It's still against the law. You're still breaking that law. So whether it was unwilling and the intention wasn't towards that, it doesn't really matter. If you accidentally kill someone, you still killed someone, even if you didn't mean to. So I felt like the point was kind of mute there. And I guess his point was saying that he's announced to his knowledge he never was trying to corrupt someone. If it happened, it wasn't his intention. And also on that point, he doesn't believe he's necessarily corrupting them because he's never even gotten like a bad review or someone that is a student attacking him, only people who aren't students that attack him. At one point when he's talking about like corrupting and everything, he said, and further that the young men learn from me what they can buy from time to time for a drachma at most in the bookshops. So there's a part where he's saying that like the books he's making them read is corrupting them, and or like doing that, and is it his fault that the books are corrupting them, or a book can corrupt them just as much as I can? I put, well, a book, he was saying a book can't corrupt, but I think a book can corrupt. You have things like Mein Kampf. If you think it's a bad thing, the Communist Manifesto, there's plenty of books that change someone's mindset and the way that they think. And so I don't think you can necessarily make the argument that like the book can't corrupt them. Next, he starts talking about like the punishment of like being put to death and how he does not fear death. He doesn't do what he does to avoid death. And so there's no gain in the corruption, and basically. So one quote he mentions is, to fear death, gentlemen, is no other than to think oneself wise when one is not. To think one knows what one does not know. He's basically saying fearing death is useless. It happens to everyone, and it's not a reason to change how you act. If death comes upon the way that you act, as long as you're acting a certain way, it's not due to you or it's not bad. And this is in the realm of philosophy because how he often gets people to hate him. He's not doing it to live a long life. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do. And later he says at one point, I differ from the majority of men. And if I were to claim that I am wiser than anyone in anything, it would be in this, that as I have no adequate knowledge of things in the underworld, so I do not think I have. I do know, however, that it is wicked and shameful to do wrong and to disobey one's superior, be he God or man. I found this really interesting. It was basically an agnostic viewpoint before that was even really a thing, at least to my knowledge. He was essentially saying that he doesn't know if the underworld is real. He doesn't know if the gods are real, but doesn't mean that you shouldn't live your life as a good person, which I'm personally agnostic, I guess I would say. And so I kind of relate extremely well to that particular quote, especially the part at the end where it says, however, that is wicked and shameful to do wrong, to disobey one's superior, be he man or God. It's basically living a happy, full, and kind life, despite whether you know if God will praise you at the end or punish you. And the way I always viewed it was, if I live a good life as a good person, if there is a God, then they would recognize that and they would still send me to heaven if it's heaven per se. And if they are willing to send me to hell because I didn't go to church every week and do things of that sort, even though I live my life as a good person, then I don't really care, because it's not the type of God that I would personally want to worship if they were to condemn people who were good, kind people just because they didn't go to a building once a week. That's enough about my religion or what I think about that. But I just thought that related a lot to how he looked at agnostic viewpoint, even though that wasn't really a thing back then. Next, he starts talking about mental harm, in the sense that they think they're harming him by putting him on trial and doing these things. But he's saying the true harm is to yourself, and how it's going to haunt you at night, basically, for putting an innocent man on trial and condemning an innocent man. So, for example, he says, "Neither Miletus or Antius can harm me in any way. He could not harm me, for I do not think it is permitted that a better man be harmed by a worse. Certainly he might kill me, or perhaps banish or disenfranchise me, which he and maybe others think to be great harm, but I do not think so." And also, he's saying that no matter what physical damage you do to me, it is never going to do true harm to me compared to the harm that you're doing to yourself mentally for condemning me. And I don't care what physical harm you can bring to me, because that's not true harm. I'm at peace of mind with myself. I know what I did was right, so no matter what you say, I will be at peace if I get sentenced to death. That's basically what he's talking about and what I got from that, which is a smart way to live, I think. Essentially saying, living by your virtues and your ways and not going against them just because you're afraid of being hurt, which is important in multiple things, especially in protest. If you truly believe in something and you protest something, there are consequences and dangerous things that can happen. You can get injured during protests, especially if it turns violent in any way. Not the protest, but the reaction by police or government. And so you have to weigh, is it going to do you more mental harm to not stand up for what is right? Or is it going to do you more harm, mental harm, to be physically injured? Or are you more scared of being hurt? Are you more scared of being hurt than mental harm in your head? That's what he's kind of saying. And will you stand by your virtues? And he just goes on to talk more about other stuff similar to that. And then eventually the jury gives the verdict of being guilty. And then Miletus asks for the penalty of death. And then from there, he basically goes savage mode and he doesn't give two craps anymore. And he just wants to give the ultimate lecture to all these jurors, basically. And he's just rude to them, and then eventually they sentence him to death. He basically says, "You will rue the day." So what he actually says is, "It is for the sake of a short time, men of Athens, that you will acquire the reputation and the guilt in the eyes of those who want to denigrate the city of having killed Socrates, a wise man. For they who want to revel, you will say that I am wise, even if I am not." He basically says you will rue the day. And so he also goes back to the point of where he doesn't want to grovel at their feet to be innocent. So he says, "I would much rather die after this kind of defense than live after making the other kind. Neither I nor any man should on trial or in war contrive to avoid death at any cost." So he's willing to die for what he believes in, basically. And he goes on to talk about it a little bit more. Then it basically goes to the end. I think the last thing I've highlighted is this. It says that a good man cannot be harmed either in life or death, and that his affairs are not neglected by the gods. Going back to sort of what I said before, to where he believes if he lives his life by the virtues he believes in and being a good person, he has nothing to fear from the gods. And that's basically what I got out of Apology, was basically standing by your own virtues and doing what you need to stand by your virtues. And you shouldn't let being scared of death or physical harm come in that way. And we've talked about that a lot as well. So what did I gain from all this? Now that I'm talking about it more on camera, I see there are a few life lessons and good things that have been pointed out in terms of questioning things, looking at things at different perspectives, standing up for your rights and what you believe in, and a few other things like that. Now, do I think it's changed me mentally where I have to live my life in a new way now and I'm like enlightened? Not quite yet. I mean, I've only read two small passages when it comes to Plato's work, and so there's more to read, obviously, and I might find that with other philosophers that aren't necessarily Plato. But this journey is just more about what I think overall, what's happening, and my opinion of it all. Am I going to like connect with Plato, especially when he gets over Socrates dying and does all of that? Or am I going to disagree with a lot of the things he says? And will I find him inspirational or take him in a different way? I know just from hearing other people talk about philosophy a lot of people will connect to different aspects in philosophy and different beliefs. And so I'm interested to find out what exactly I'll connect to. I don't think I'm 100% connected yet when it comes to what I read, but I definitely find it interesting. I enjoy reading it and taking notes, taking it slow and learning it that way. And I am kind of going to avoid other philosophy videos. I don't want to kind of change the way I'm thinking or taking other opinions just yet. Maybe once I finish some more works, then I'll go back and read what people thought about them to see what they gathered from them. But I kind of want to solidify my opinions first and get them in video before I analyze any other arguments or viewpoints that people have. But overall, if you gained anything out of this, if you liked the video, or if you found any of it interesting, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. And if you could leave a like and subscribe, that'd be greatly appreciated. I hope you liked this philosophy journal number 1 for Euthyphro and Apology. Next, I might just do one part. We'll see. So the next part that we have, I gotta go to the table of contents. So we have Crito and Phaedo, and that will complete basically the death of Socrates. Now Crito is small, but Phaedo is big. I might combine the two. I don't know yet, but we'll see next time. We'll see what I decide and what I put in there. But either way, thank you for joining me all again. Once more, if you could like and subscribe, that'd be great. I'd appreciate you spending your time to watch this video, and if you're still watching, thank you so much. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.